see that? Or just
Hello Malaysia and welcome to another edition of The Nation. I'm Jared Ratnam, and of course today we're going to once again take a look at what's happening in the world of medicine. Joining me in the studio is Dr. Anbalagan Kupuswamy. He's an internist. We'll find out what an internist is. If you don't know what an internist is, we'll give you some information about that. We'll also talk about the hospital that he's working in currently, which is the Manipal Hospital in Klang, and also what he specializes in, which is infectious diseases. Well, in the meantime, let's get to know Dr. Anbalagan. Doctor, so sorry for that abrupt start, and thank you very much for joining us right here at The Nation. Of course, it's always interesting when we bring on doctors every Tuesday and specialists in various areas, finding out about your area of speciality and also about the little things we don't know about your area of speciality. But before we get into the thicker things, let's find out who you are and how long you've been in the scene for, when you started medicine, and what brought you to internal medicine more than anything else. So, what gravitated you towards internal medicine?
Good morning,
Thank you.
Jared. Thank you for having me. Basically, I've been in the industry, healthcare industry, for about 35 years now. I graduated in 1979 from the University of Madras. I studied in Kilpog Medical College, and I returned back in 1981. I started my housemanship at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Kota Kinabalu. Then, after finishing housemanship, I went on to do my medical officer in Duchess of Kent in Sandakan. I was there for 2 years, and then I came down to mainland Malaysia. I was in the district hospital in Kuala Kubu, and I was there for another 2 years before I went to do my specialty, adult internal medicine. Actually, it's a prelude to the training in MRCP. I went to Klang, and I worked there as a registrar in medicine. And I qualified in 1990 as an adult physician.
Adult physician.
Yeah.
So when you say an adult physician, what does the area of an adult physician cover? Of course, essentially it's about adults. Yeah,
that's right. Basically, it means any ailment that an adult do come and encounter. That's what it is. So. In fact, among all the specialities, correct me if I sound conceited and things like that, because I always say that physicians are the most brainy of the lot, the most cerebral of the lot, because we have to do with the whole gamut of medicine per se. So in fact, we are usually the front line. We talk about the front line for most of the ailments, be it you look at the organ system per se, you look about the heart, you talk about the lungs, you talk about the stomach and the intestines, things like common ailments, like you're talking about non-communicable diseases like high blood pressure, systemic hypertension, diabetes mellitus, bronchial asthma, ischemic heart disease. So these are some of the things that we are likely to encounter. So it can be seen as an emergency. It can be seen as an elective in the clinic and things like that. So we come in the encounter with them. We like all things, take a history, examine the patient, stabilize the patient. The first groundwork, the advice is all laid down by us. Medication, if needed, to be started, and then we evaluate whether the patient has got a condition which subsequently has to be referred to a subspecialty, for example, cardiology, nephrology, endocrinology.
But it's interesting that I speak to many doctors, and this happens every week right here on the show. And when I speak to doctors, the one thing I'd always like to know is how they got, or what inspired them to get into the area of specialty. Of course, we always want to hear a fantastic story, but it's always, I was in this department and I saw many doctors who did that, so I decided to take that up as a specialty. In your case, was it like that?
Well, there is a definite story to an angle to this anyway, and I think I got into medicine is because of my parents, basically my mother, who was steadfast in wanting me to do medicine.
Why did she?
I don't know why. I don't know why. She never gave me the reason, things like that.
Did she feel safe with a doctor in the family?
No, maybe that's one. And number two is that I think, traditional Malaysian Indian household. You have this mindset that is either you do medicine or you do law or things like that. So maybe, but that's one of the things anyway. So that is always on the back of your mind. You call it peer pressure, you like. When you go to high school, you finish from high school, and you some sort of predetermined and things like that. But I think in retrospect, probably she knew, maybe you call it a sort of telepathy or something like that. I enjoyed med school, and when I came out, I had good mentors, you know, and when I started out, let's say in Queens as a houseman, one of my earliest mentors, who was actually a senior to me, he was already six months my senior. His name is Dr. Paramjit Singh,
right?
And he taught me a lot of basic stuff that a houseman should think. But the real interest in medicine took place because when I went over to Duchess of Kent in Sandakan, and my boss he was an expat physician. He's a Bengali by the name of Arun Kumar Ghosh, and this guy was the epitome of how everything that internal medicine, you know,
right?
And he kept saying, you know, most of the other surgical work is all basically is hands-on, but you know, we are the guys who are the thinkers behind this thing, and that sort of fascinated me. And I think my interest developed from there. And then when I came down to mainland Malaysia, then I went down to Klang in 1987. And when I got this registrarship training, and my boss at that time was Dato' Thayabaran.
Right. Of course, everyone knows Dato' Thayabaran. Yeah.
Dato' Thayabaran
is now... He was in Seremban for the longest time. Yeah.
Well, he's a fantastic man, and a fantastic physician. So these are the people who sort of inspired. And I decided then in that itself, I wanted to do internal medicine.
Right. But to do internal medicine, do you need to have a certain trait to be able... You need to think a lot, like you said.
Well, cerebral, it's just everything. It is 99% of perspiration, 1% of inspiration.
Right.
People think that, you know, to do medicine that you have to be intelligent or something like that. No, it is just hard work. It's just swatting.
Right.
It's just hitting the books and things like that. But there is a 1 or 2% of element. But there are what separates you know, people who are just everyday doers and the others, you know, people who flock to and who can look at people and listen minimally and come out with a fantastic diagnosis and treat people wholesomely and things like that. I think you have to have the element of luck and also
the element of luck.
Yeah, you have the element of luck. And people say, you know, there is a saying in my language. It said, you know, that it comes in your palms. You probably have that thing, and also providence.
Right.
You need to have you know, spiritual. That's also very, very important. Sometimes you know, you just look at people and as and when you already know. You know that, you know, this is what he has and things like that.
Right.
And this I've seen in some of the top guns in the industry itself. When I was in med school, I had the dean who was internal medicine anyway.
Right.
And when you used to come to the ward, and he would just stand on the top of the ward, in front of the ward, where there was 60 people there, and he can sniff the air and said that who's the person with this condition, the lung abscess and things like that. And nowadays it's 50 minutes in the lab and 5 minutes with the patient.
Right.
And with everything, it becomes so, you know, you rely on a lot of machinery and tools to make a diagnosis. And that is where I wanted to be. Somebody who just can listen and look and then make the diagnosis.
Fantastic. I mean, this the best story I've heard in the longest time with regards to how someone takes up a vocation or the area of speciality like you did. And for internists, for those of us who are still not sure as to what an internist does, you know, sometimes you have problems with your pills. You've got a whole, what do you call it, kaleidoscope of different colors when it comes to pills, and you don't know what goes with what or what interacts with what, and you know, what is bad for you. An internist will probably be able to sort that out for you most of the time. Most of the other doctors I know would guess it, you know. And I'm saying this out of experience because I've interviewed a lot of doctors, and I always like asking questions because, you know, if I could do it all over again, I'd take up medicine, but somehow instead of becoming a DR, I became a DJ. So that aside, coming back to what we're talking about, so you're talking about an adult physician and an internist. Is there a difference?
A medical intern, basically an intern it can be anything. It can be a medical intern, it could be a surgical intern, it could be a pediatric intern.
Right.
Okay, so when I talk about intern, when I'm doing as a medical intern, so I deal with adult patients, and the specialty is basically about medical diseases confined to the adults itself.
Right. So doesn't an internist come from as a contraction of internal medicine?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. So it's basically an adult physician. So an adult physician, what he or she does is usually do scopes. You work with gastrointestinal problems.
Yes, we do. We do gastroenterology. I mean, because now, of course, the peer pressure on the part of subspecialty and things like that. But doing endoscopy is actually a skill which can easily be acquired.
Right.
And in places where I'm talking about so much in the public sector, not so much in the private sector, but in the public sector, in places where I used to work, things like like Kuching, for instance, or even in Telukintang hospitals when I was serving there. We don't have a designated gastroenterologist. They're premium in as far as the public hospitals are concerned.
Right.
So when we learn the skills and we do scopes and things like that. So we double back in places we don't have. Of course, in the private sector, of course, if you talk about tertiary healthcare centers itself, in private sectors itself, there are designated gastroenterologists. They do the bulk of the thing. But in a setup in hours like that, this is in the internists. If it's quite adept and let's say has been certified to do scopes, we do that. We also deal with that kind of problem.
So from the time you started, you passed out as an internist, you did you were concentrated on your area of specialty. From the time you started practice then, or with regards to adult medicine, and now, do you see yourself working quicker and diagnosing things quicker now than before?
Yes, definitely.
It comes with experience.
In fact, it's experience. But right now, as and when, first of all, I think observation. The minute the patient walks into your practice,
right,
you already saw that's vision. Number two is you take a history itself. Probably about 30 years ago, you probably want to go to all the nitty gritty and things like that.
Right.
But right now itself, you just zoom down. You look at the essential core points that the patient has to tell you that, and then go to the relevant the systems immediately, and come to let's say a quick plausible diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll find out more about Dr. Anbalagan. We'll also find out a little bit about his hospital, the Manipal Hospital in Klang. What's that all about? We'll come back and find out a little bit more about that. We'll also be talking about infectious diseases and stuff an adult physician does, stuff we should know, maybe a little bit about medication. That and all coming your way right here at The Nation. Stay with us.
Isu semasa dan terkini industri kreatif tanah air. Perkembangan muzik tempatan. Lensa anak seni. Aksi layar perak. Tanpa gosip dan sensasi, semuanya disisipkan selama setengah jam dalam Tedi Sini, bukan sekadar hiburan. Setiap Sabtu, jam 12.30 tengah hari, hanya di Bernama TV.
Kavita, mailing dah set ke belum?
Sikit je lagi, Puan.
Apa menu kita hari ni?
Semua menu sihat. Ikan bakar, sup ayam, sayur-sayuran. Banyaklah.
Puan, banyaknya guna minyak. Bahayakan kesihatan lah.
Betul lah macam ni. Saya dah kurangkan separuh dari biasa ni.
Cuba rasa ni. Sedap tak?
Biar kurang masin, jangan lebih.
Betul tu. Kita kena kurangkan minyak, gula,
Garam dan santan dalam masakan. Barulah ramai pelanggan datang ke kedai kita.
Semuanya
sihat belaka.
Menyelami realiti, menjejaki masa, meninjau peristiwa, paparan kronikal kembara kehidupan, pelbagai keunikan juga pengalaman menarik. Segalanya disorotkan selama setengah jam dalam jurnal bernama setiap Ahad jam 9.30 malam hanya di Bernama TV.
Hello Malaysia and welcome back to The Nation. I'm Jared Ratnam, and today once again we're talking about stuff from the medical world or within the medical world. Joining me in the studio is Dr. Anbalagan Kupuswamy. He's an adult physician and he's also specializes in infectious diseases, a little something we want to talk about later. And we're also going to delve into his hospital, find out what the Manipal Klang Hospital or Manipal Hospital in Klang is all about. But in the meantime, let's talk about doctors and the study of medicine. Things have changed quite a bit, and you can see that when you go out to a hospital, maybe to a public hospital or private hospital, and every time you speak to a young doctor, and I'm not generalizing here, don't get me wrong, I don't generalize. There's some who are fantastic orators, some who are people person, they can interact with people, but I think for the most part a doctor should be able to interact with people, talk to people, really get them to calm down and find out their problems, while making them feel very relaxed. Or even if you're going to tell them something like you've got the big C, you need to be able to do it in a way that keeps them calm at all times, and that I think is a skill. A skill a radio announcer has, a TV announcer has. I think the doctor needs to have that same skill. But when I've spoken to quite a few of them, and a lot of them when I see them speak to older people, especially people who can't understand, who don't quite understand much about medicine, or who don't know anything about their medical records, they always get frustrated and they start to condescend upon them. And I remember walking to a hospital once, and there was this lady in India who came in. She was not a tourist, or she was here for some reason. A bus knocked her, and what happened was she was sent to the hospital in Seremban. And the doctor is telling this lady who doesn't speak a word of English that your femur is broken. So I'm looking at him, and because we brought this lady in, I'm looking at him and I'm asking him, do you think she'd understand what a femur is? So it's things like this that needs to, it takes a lot of common sense to be able to interact with people. But is there a difference between learning now and learning then? Learning these skills? Well,
definitely, because you see, basically, I think the medical curriculum is to be partly blamed for that.
Right.
All right. Because it's basically book knowledge, and book knowledge and the experience that you gain in the real world is two different things. That's the stark reality that hits you the day that you graduate and you come and join. Let's say you start the first day in your job and things like that. Whatever that you are never ever prepared.
Right.
No matter how much thing that you are prepared, things like that. But the medical fraternity has recognized the fact that when you talk about ethics, communication, people's skills are a very essential commodity to prepare the young doctor when he takes up the first job and things like that. And what, like you just mentioned about, you just gave a case scenario of that person. Basically, and especially in a multi-plural country like this, I think when you talk about sensitivities regarding race, religion, culture, is very, very important.
Right.
Very, very important. And I would be, in fact, very proud to say that we don't have a problem as far as communication is concerned, actually, because most of us can actually converse in most of the three major languages anyway. But probably in this case, because the fact that she's in India, she probably couldn't talk anything besides the Indian or Tamil or something like that. Maybe the doctor there was probably a non-Tamil speaking person. Yeah,
right. He was a non-Tamil speaking person. That's understandable. But I mean, if I can't speak Tamil too, and I don't speak Tamil, but if I were to explain something to someone who speaks Tamil, I'd get someone who understands or speaks the language to translate for me. That's the simplest thing to do.
Maybe that's why probably that he was probably raw and he probably not. But that mechanism is actually in place.
Right.
We do it even now. Even me at this point in time, where a place like Klang I work, and we have a fair amount of a Hokkien population, and we see a lot of Hokkiens, Chinese come to our place, and of course I don't speak Hokkien, but over the years you manage to learn some of the essential things that you need to say to the patient. Even if I have, for a moment, if I feel that there's going to be a problem with communication, I immediately sound somebody who can help me. So that should have been in place.
Right.
That's very, very important, because that is number one thing that indirectly you care about what you're going to say to the person, and make sure that you're saying the right thing and that wins over the patient. That means you have made an effort to make sure that he or she can understand what you're about to deliver to the patient. I think that's essential. And I think that it's always that. That's something probably this particular doctor, or maybe the training that was better.
And whilst talking to this doctor, I said, look, hey man, I don't think she understands what you're saying. He says, do you know how tired I am? I said, I don't care. And of course, every time they start to ask you who you are, you just throw that I work for the press thing, and it works. Yeah, and I mean, and we do it for people out there. The general public, some of them don't know much about medicine. They go, once went to a hospital, just at the pharmacy, man was given 10 different boxes of pills. Said, ini dua pil 3 kali sehari, ini you ambil sekian. And I said, can you explain to him what medications he's taking, or at least write it down for him? He says, who are you? I said, seriously, this is your job, you need to do it. And the man was lost. He had so many pills, he was probably having some cardiovascular problems, and this is the thing I see which is lacking. I remember back in the day, of course, I'm not editing the past well, but I remember back in those days when they give you medicine, they're very thorough about how you use it, and they tell you, give you information that you need to know as a user of that medication. And today I feel that that's kind of lost. And you were talking about mentorship, and this is something I wanted to touch on.
That's true, because of late, you see the spat in the papers and things like that. That people who, especially I'm talking about the health profession, the doctors who are coming out, and the fact that the question about the standards that's been there among the graduates and things like that. It all boils down to it has always been there. It's always been there. Even my times, when you say that whether you're a graduate from the United Kingdom, or whether you graduate from the North Americas, or you graduate from Australia, and then say that you're from Taiwan, or you're Philippines, or you're from India, things like that. So there was a
double standard.
Step. It's even among the bosses that you seem to work with, because there was a preconceived notion that if you come from a lesser university, from a lesser, that you probably are not up with the big boys and things like that. I always have refuted that. I never totally agree that. The college that you go to, it doesn't matter. It's actually the individual. It's the individual that is. And there are excellent doctors from anywhere itself. It comes to the balls and the individual. And
they usually say, if the doctor is trained in Scotland, he's probably better than other doctors who are trained elsewhere. You hear that all the time. Even within the circle, the medical circles.
It's the concept of medicine. It doesn't change anywhere.
Right.
The fundamentals of medicine doesn't change whichever part of the world that you're actually in. But when you come back, when you all of us start at ground zero, let's say you're an intern, like that, that's where you develop a kinship. You align yourself with a mentor who can pass that. And those days, what they used to do is they have the consultant level, then you have the middle order people. The middle order people are the registrars and things like that, who are training to become consultants and things like that. And then you have the trainees.
Right.
So this middle order people usually were mentors. They took on all the young people, they taught them and things like that. Now, I'm a prime example of that. I actually have benefited from people like that. Now what's happening is that, because there's a great divide now among there's always the debate and the divide between the public health system and the private health system, and what the thing, and of course as economics grow, the needs arise, and the world that we live in, and the temptation that we yield to and things like that. So what happens? So it's a matter of time. You put X amount of dollars, you go to med school, you come out, look, I've invested so much in my education, and the thinking is like that now. I invest, let's say, $200,000.
Right.
So I should try to make that back or something like that. So I do my basic tour of duty as far as the public hospitals are concerned. Then I come, then I go into the private sector and I start making the money and things like that. So that seems, so all these good middle order people seem to have left. So the young ones, I left with a dearth of good middle order people who can actually mentor them. And that's why I think a lot of these people are actually suffering. And the training is probably not, of course there might be criticisms to what I have to say, but there's something that we really need to seriously look into.
Of course, when it comes to gaining experience, it's about, of course, essentially it's about you going out there and learning trial by fire sometimes. But it's always better when there's someone to hold your hand and tell you, okay, this may happen, that may happen. Tell you what your chances are most of the time, and it'll help you develop as a person. And I think for the most part, that's what mentorship is all about.
Yes, definitely. It's just not about knowledge and skills. It's a whole person as well. How you approach people, how you approach medicine as such, and what is the end result? Why do you want to be what you are? Things like that.
Right. Well, we'll take another break and we'll come back. Like we said, we want to talk about infectious diseases. We'll also give you some information about the Manipal Hospital in Klang and a little bit about medication. Hopefully, we'll see where our conversation takes us to, and we'll try to make some magic out of it right here at The Nation. Stay with us.
Apa kabar pemirsa? Salam dari Jakarta. Sebuah program kerjasama Kantor Berita Indonesia Antara dengan Kantor Berita Malaysia bernama kembali hadir menjumpai Anda.
Sedar tak kita tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, keadaan iklim yang tak menentu sekarang ni. Perubahan iklim meningkatkan kejadian kemarau, derebu, banjir dan ia menyumbang kepada perubahan iklim yang berlaku secara drastik. Inilah dia faktor-faktornya. Yang pertama, asap dari kenderaan. Yang kedua, penebangan dan pembakaran hutan. Yang ketiga, pembebasan asap dari industri perkilangan. Dan yang keempat, pelupusan sisa buangan. Ini usaha yang Pak Abu buat, iaitu yang pertama, menanam pokok. Yang kedua, mengurangkan atau tidak menggunakan beg plastik. Yang ketiga, mengasingkan bahan buangan. Yang keempat, mengitar semula bahan buangan. Dan yang kelima, memilih barangan dari bahan kita semula. Ada banyak lagi usaha yang boleh kita lakukan. Antaranya, kurangkan pemanduan kereta persendirian dan banyakkan penggunaan kenderaan awam.
Anda adalah sebahagian daripada penyelesaiannya.
Menongkah batasan masa, mengupas isu semasa, jadi saluran pelbagai suara, segalanya baru dan benar di Berita Bernama TV.
Hello and welcome back to The Nation. I'm Jared Ratnam, and today, once again, in the studio we have a doctor with us. We're talking to Dr. Anbalagan Kupuswamy. He's from the Manipal Hospital in Klang, and he's an adult physician. We're now going to move into his area of speciality, which is infectious diseases. So what do we need to know about infectious diseases? Like, always when you say infectious disease, HIV, the first thing that comes to mind, yeah?
That's right.
But it's more than that.
That's right, definitely. And basically infectious diseases, if you want to define, it's basically a communicable disease or a contagious disease, which is brought on by germs. It's the layman's what's the description. Germs can be bacteria, could be viruses, could be rickettsia, fungal, things like that. I think in the early 80s and the 90s, there's so much of prominence brought infectious diseases speciality to the fore in the greater part of the world is because of the advent of the onset of HIV per se. But the bane of mankind, if we look at the history of medicine itself, infectious diseases actually has been a great role to play. The multiple plagues, if we talk about, go back history itself, it's all caused by infectious diseases. And we are far away from not being afflicted by that. If you look at, let's say, even current practice, let's say the hospital that I work in, when you talk about adult medical consultations and even inpatients, you find that 40 to 60% at this point in time from an internist, all right, more so with somebody who's got an interest in adult infectious diseases, is actually infections. And common infections like what we seem to be besieged now is a problem now. It's still a problem. Dengue fever, of course, you can read all the papers.
It's a huge problem in Selangor.
And influenza and leptospirosis.
Right.
So much so, in fact, it's already mentally tuned to all my doctors.
I'd like to talk about a few things. Number one, the flu. When you say you have a flu, what is a flu? Some people misinterpret a stomach flu and a flu. Okay, and then there's this other problem, which is a leptospirosis or leptospirosis, which is basically they call some of us call it what do you call that?
Rat fever.
Rat fever or rat urine fever. What are these? Okay, let's start with leptospirosis first. Yeah, how would you explain it?
Well, one word.
Kencing tikus. In Malay, it's called kencing tikus. Yeah,
it's one word. It's actually called a zoonosis. Zoonosis is actually diseases. It's actually brought on by vectors or animals which carry them.
Right.
In this case, what happens is that the leptospira, which is actually a spirochete, it gets excreted by the rat. All right. And what happens rats abundant in places where there's a lot of refuse which has not been collected. And they are nocturnal feeders. When they come out, they feed, and they live in tunnels and sewers. So when they come out, during the process of feeding itself, they urinate themselves, and this urine gets in the ground. Now, if they, let's say, go down to a drinking source of supply, like probably a stream, for instance, and they go to drink water, and if they happen to excrete urine there, and if that puddle of water is not free flowing, it gets trapped and stays there.
Right.
And you happen to, let's say, go for white water rafting, for instance, and you happen to jump into that thing, and you have a cut or an aberration in your skin, or let's say through your eyes, for instance, and you get into, and the germs get into your system, and you develop this leptospira.
So, saying if it's in a body of water, doesn't matter how small or how big the body of water is.
Most of the time, it's actually running water, but it's somewhere, let's say, at the site, at the embankment. Basically, what happened? You have a pool of water which doesn't go anywhere. It's trapped and stays there itself.
Right. So now we understand a little bit more about leptospirosis or leptospirosis. The two pronunciations, one's British, one's American. It's the same. It's tomato, no difference. Well, the next thing I want to talk about is the flu. Well, everyone says, I have the flu, or I have a cold. How do you explain this?
Well, you see, a cold is also an infectious disease, all right? It's caused by, it's called a common cold.
Right.
There are certain types of viruses which can cause that. A lot of us have the common cold. But if you want to define flu, if we want to say the full moniker for that is actually influenza. It's caused by influenza viruses. Basically, human disease is caused by A and B, all right? And you have a characteristic triad. To say that you have influenza, you have to have a temperature of 38 degrees or 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
You have to have a sore throat and a cough. It's basically that. So anyone who has got an abrupt onset of high temperatures with a sore throat and a cough, all right, you would think that this patient has influenza.
Sometimes we go see a doctor, and you know how some of your friends told me, he gave me a shot and it cleared up straight away. What does this mean?
Basically, it's probably an upper respiratory tract infection, probably a common cold itself.
Right.
And the other thing is actually people mistake is I got the flu, but it's usually an allergic disorder. Most of them because of allergy of the nurses, for instance, like they
say hay fever.
That's right. Yeah. So they tend to, but that is an allergic condition.
Right.
Okay. But here is an infective condition, highly contagious and highly communicable to people, and it's actually an outbreak of sorts now. We seem to have a higher than normal incidence of influenza, at least in the practice that I'm seeing right now.
Right. But if you notice, everyone also says that this is the season for colds and flus. It's the whole year. If someone gets a cold, it says it's a season, everyone's having it. But we're actually, as a doctor or an adult physician, when you meet people, do you see this the year round?
Yes, actually, it depends.
There's no season for it, isn't it?
No, it depends on which part of the world you come from. You traditionally, it's always been thought that influenza, when you look at textbooks and Western textbooks, it is always the beginning of fall and winter.
Right.
So that's why it has been traditionally thought that you get influenza vaccination, to get vaccinated during this time, especially people who seem to be at very high risk of contracting and people who can develop complications due to flu itself. But in our country, it's a bit different because we don't have the typical 4 climates itself. Ours will start somewhere around October, but the peak of that goes down to March till June. So our season is that actually. So you have a seasonal flu, you have all-round year flu and things like that. And now, with the rapid advent of globalization, air travel is just minutes away. Today morning you are somewhere else and things like that. So diseases also tend to be brought down to every corner of the globe itself. So no one is actually away from that. But the good side of this influenza itself, which I must emphasize to all my colleagues itself, is and the public at large itself, for a small token of money, you can help to prevent yourself from getting on an annual basis itself.
Well, it's a vaccination.
It's a vaccination. It's quite safe. Anybody more than 6 months itself is a candidate for that. But of course, there are special targeted groups. But besides that, everybody else who otherwise fit and doesn't have a contraindication taking the flu vaccine can take that.
Well, I will come back and find out a little bit more about medication, and also we'll talk a little bit about the Manipal Hospital in Klang right here at The Nation. Stay with us.
Terima kasih. Sama-sama. Terima kasih. Sama-sama. Sama-sama. Terima kasih. Sama-sama. Sama-sama.
Satu cerita, satu bangsa, satu Malaysia. Menongkah batasan masa, mengupas isu semasa, jadi saluran pelbagai suara, segalanya baru dan benar di Berita Bernama TV.
Hello and welcome back to The Nation. I'm Jared Ratnam, and we're talking about, of course, medicine and the little things we can understand about medicine. We try to do that on a weekly basis right here at The Nation. Joining me in the studio is Dr. Anbalagan Kuppuswamy, an internist, or rather an adult physician, and he also specializes in infectious diseases. He's from the Manipal Hospital in Klang. Well, off the airwaves, we're talking about internal medicine and why the world needs more internists, right? And you have an explanation for that, and you'd probably like to share that with the country.
What's happening now is because it's probably peer pressure driven, either from the medical fraternity itself or the public at large itself. The seeking out of the subspecialists to a certain extent that you're looking at toe specialists and the nail specialists and things like that. But what's actually needed is actually you need people to be a good intern, an intern who can come in, assess the situation, take a history, come to a plausible diagnosis, command the situation, and then lead the way where this patient, what is the condition that the patient needs, who they need to see, and things like that. And overall, if let's say if it still comes within his realm, the fact that he is able to deal with that and give a reassurance and say that he's the treatable entity per self. Now what we have now is we have seen people who come who don't even have a fixed diagnosis. You probably have to see various subspecialties, do a tour of duty, probably busting enormous amount of money and coming back, and probably the underlying probably is something very, very simple which can be solved at the first instance itself.
Right.
So I think here is because itself, I think in the late 90s and the early 2000s itself, when there was a clamor to do subspecialty work, the glamorous, the big money spinning, things like cardiology and gastroenterology.
Right.
So that took the chunk of the thing, and every young aspiring intern who probably wanted to take it up because of the glamour that it held and the word that it held. But what happened is that internship, the interns, actually the speciality of intern per se actually suffered.
Right.
So you don't have people who actually can listen to people, with simple problems, try to sort them out, reassure them at the first instance itself, instead of sending them to various subdisciplines who probably never needed in the first place.
Right. I'm sure us for us folks or the general public who don't know much about medicine, when we see any doctor, we meet any doctor, if we have any ailments, the first thing we do is ask for some advice. And sometimes when you get some of these guys who specialize in say certain areas like cardiology or gynecology, you ask them anything outside their realm, just a little bit outside. No, I don't think I can explain this because it's not my area of specialty. And I think for the most part of it, most doctors should be able to talk a little bit more about or a little bit outside of what they do, most of the time. And I don't see that these days. For some reason, I try to see it, but I don't see it. Everyone's very focused on what they're doing, which is good. Focus is great. But, like you said, we need a commander. You come in, you see a situation, you can assess a situation and see where the person needs to go for help next. And if it's within their realm, they should be able to.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And that's why probably the old school, if you call me the old school, things like that, probably 20 years ago, we didn't have all this so much of subspecialties. You had to do everything, whether you liked it or not, and you had to know the particular stuff when you want to give the kind of advice and things like that. So they were all rounders then. But this concept of intern is still there. It's still very much around. But somehow or other, like I said, because it involves a lot of work, it's probably not financially rewarding. For the younger generation itself, maybe that's why not take on that. But I think countries like the North Americas, they are going back. They're going back to. They're looking for people who want to go back to learn, to do intern, become a good intern, and probably that soon countries in this part of the world will probably realize that that is also the way to go. We have an equal balance of being an intern, a good, responsible, efficient, and intern, reliable, plus subspecialties in the surrounding that.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your hospital, the Manipal Hospital in Klang. Apparently, it's got a bit of a history, and it's been taken over. Can you tell us a little bit about?
Well, actually in 1998, first March. That's where the hospital that is actually based in Klang, and it was a shop house practice, basically.
A shop house
practice, and it is held together by one family, Dato Dr. Purivepan. He is actually a renowned obstetrician and gynecologist in Klang. So the family actually, they wanted to start a hospital, just not based on obstetrics and gynecology, but also to bring in other relevant medical specialities. and it was named as Aruna Mari Specialist Medical Center at that point in time. About 1.5 years ago, they were bought over by Manipal Group. You know Manipal Enterprise, Manipal Hospitals, all right? But the Manipal name is synonymous with medical education. I'm sure a lot of people who are actually graduates in Malaysia itself had their primary medical education in Manipal itself.
Right.
The present campus is actually located in Malacca. Manipal Group itself has got a vast experience. In fact, they own about 15 to 16 hospitals in India. So they are big game players there, and say they have want to stretch the expertise to bring the expertise to this parts of the world, and they have chosen Malaysia and Klang Hospital, the present hospital I work. They've chosen as the first. They bought it over about 1.5 years ago. What was a secondary level hospital, tertiary level care hospital, has been converted into a tertiary level. We have brought in other disciplines like, besides the core disciplines like internal medicine or surgery, trauma, orthopedics, anesthesia, and pediatrics. Now has encompassed things like urology, dermatology, neurosurgery, even oral maxillofacial surgery. Now they have also bought an adjoining piece of land. They have already built. In fact, it's completed a standalone 7-story hospital, and they wanted to bring in tertiary level care.
Right.
And they will want to be stand up and counted. They have things like neurosurgery, open heart, and other disciplines that we don't have at this point in time, like neurology, nephrology, endocrinology, things like that. So that's somewhere around July. There will be an opening, which is in Klang itself. Sorry.
Well, what's interesting is there's the public health sector and the private health sector, and what some of us see is a chasm. I mean, when you talk about public health sector, the public health sector, we can go on complaining about it over and over again. But in many countries around the world, even in the UK or in Australia, to get an appointment to do a little surgery, it'll take you months, just like we have here. And of course, our system is getting better, but I mean, more can be done to better the system. Now, with private healthcare service, things are done chop, but then again, there's a factor of money. It's very expensive for most of us. And they have a new saying now, keep yourself healthy because you can't afford healthcare. So, how do you think we can bridge this gap? Yeah.
No, surprisingly, because this divide, the perceived divide. In fact, I'll just anecdotal. I'll just tell you what we experience here. And I always have the greatest admiration of the public health system in our country, because I'm a product of the public health system. I was there about 16 years and things like that. We get to do a lot of stuff, underappreciated, overworked maybe, maybe financially not that rewarding in those days. Right. But now, things have already taken a change for the better. And even in a hospital like where I work, we still rely a great amount of cooperation between the public. For example, in like transfusion requirements, we don't have a blood bank in our hospitals yet. So people who need transfusion, we rely on them, and they have never turned us down. And there are gray areas, even even intermediary measures. The people who come into our place, let's say, who either have corporate clients or insurance clients or even cash paying patients, who come in. And after a while, the financial aspect of it runs out. They ran out their quota and things like that. When we have to, they are ill, but they still need to continue treatment. They cannot afford. When we transfer them over to the public health, they always are willing to take them. So kudos to them. Right. No matter what people, some people always have to say, there are a lot of brickbats thrown at them. I would say salute these people. I mean, probably salute them. And I think, and we still have a great number of corporations. And then to say that, we talk about pricing, for instance. In our place, actually, contrary to what people think, doctors, they say they make a lot of money in private sector. The hospitals make a private. We are actually, we are guarded. We have our guidelines and things like that. We can never go above that. We can go above that because we have to answer to the insurance companies. We have to answer the corporate clients and things like that. Probably it's more of a myth than thing. But like all things, everything like you look at the cost of prices now, they're escalating. Every year you can add a premium to that. So the cost of production of medications, acquiring technology, so that there is a level of appreciation, things like that one cannot run away from that. From there. So there are certain areas which need certain amount of expertise which might be available across board, either probably in the public and things like that. So if you can get that in the private sector, if the person is there, so some amount of premium has to be given. Right.
Before I let you go, your take-home message to those of us watching this program, and for the most part, a lot of parents want their kids to take up medicine. I want my son, my daughter to be a doctor. For those aspiring to become doctors, or are those who are wanting their kids to become doctors, what's your
very simple. I think it's basically upon them. There should not be any peer pressure on part of the parents per se. You should know your child. Your child should whether that your child is whether geared towards particular medicine, and if they and you must make it a point, like let's say expose them. Now there are various what the plans and things into place where they can get exposed just before they're joining what the practice of medicine involves, and what they can have a primer to that. So they probably what they do is the parents should take these kids, get them exposed to say that is that really what you want to do, and I think they should do away. They shouldn't enforce what they would their expectations of on their child itself.
With that, we'd like to thank Dr. Anbalagan Kuppuswamy. He is an internist and an infection disease specialist from Manipal Hospital in Klang. We hope to bring him back next month. And what we want to talk about is we want to go through a whole hour of painkillers. We want to talk about painkillers. Hopefully, if I get the approval of certain stakeholders and companies, we will bring these painkillers in, and we'll show you exactly what these painkillers are and what they do. There's just so many in the market. All of us are going out there and buying painkillers like sweets. It's good we know what these painkillers do. So we'll definitely try to work out a show like that for you right here at The Nation. In the meantime, you have a great day ahead, and thank you so much for joining us, Doc. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.